In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez, Part 3, Chapter 10. Pena owed me, was the way I saw it. The next day I put on the yellow dress I'd just finished, and the black heels they had passed on to me. I talcumed myself into a cloudy fragrance and crossed the hedge to Don Bernardo's house. "Where are you going, Mama?" Norris called after me. I'd left her tending the children. "Out," I said, waving my hand over my shoulder, "to see Don Bernardo." I didn't want Mama or they to know about my outing. Don Bernardo really was our next-door angel, disguised as an old Spaniard with an ailing wife. He had come to the island under a refugee program Trujillo had instituted in the 40s to, quote, whiten the race, unquote. He had not been much help to the dictator in that regard, since he and Doña Belén had never had any children. Now he spent most of his days reminiscing on his porch and tending to an absence belted into a wheelchair. From some need of his own, Don Bernardo pretended his wife was just under the weather rather than suffering from dementia. He conveyed made-up greetings and apologies from Doña Belén. Once a week, the old man struggled to get behind the wheel of his Plymouth to drive Doña Belén over to Salcido for a little checkup. He was a true angel, all right. He had come through for us as a godfather for all the little ones, Raulito, Minu, Manolito, at a time when most people were avoiding the Mirabals. Then, after the girls were taken, I realized that Jacqueline hadn't been christened. All my children had been baptized the country way within the first cycle of the moon after their birth. But Maria Teresa, who had always loved drama and ceremony, had kept postponing the christening until it could be done properly in the cathedral in San Francisco, with the bishop officiating and the girls' choir from Immaculada singing Regina Coeli. Maybe pride ran in more than one set of veins in the family. One afternoon, when I was still a little crazy with grief, I ran out to Mama's house barefoot with Jacqueline in my arms. Don Bernardo was already at his door with his hat on and his keys in his hand. "So you're ready to be the fish in the waters of salvation, eh, my little snapper?" He chuckled. He chucked Jacqueline under her little chin, and her tears dried up like it was July in Monte Cristi. Now I was at Don Bernardo's door again, but this time without a baby in my arms. "What a pleasure, Patria Mercedes," he greeted me, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to have me drop in at any hour of the day or night, barefoot or dressed up, with a favor to ask. "Don Bernardo, here I am, bothering you again," I said, "but I need a ride to Santiago to Captain Pena's office." "A visit to the lion's den, I see." I caught a glimpse of a smile in the curve of his thick white mustache. Briefly, he entered the bedroom where Doña Belén lay harnessed in her second childhood. Then out he came, crooking his elbow as my escort. "Doña Belén sends her greetings," he said. Captain Victor Alcino Pena received me right away. Maybe it was my nerves, but his office had the closed-in feeling of a jail cell, metal jealousies at the windows and fluorescence the only light. An air conditioner gave out a violent mechanical sound as if it were about to give out. I wished I were outside, waiting under the almond trees in the square with Don Bernardo. "It's a pleasure to see you, Doña Patria." Captain Pena eyeballed me as if he had to be true to his verb and see every part of me. "How can I be of help?" he asked, motioning for me to sit down. I had planned to make an impassioned plea, but no words came out of my mouth. It wouldn't have been exaggerating to say Patria Mercedes had been struck dumb in the devil's den. "I must say I was a little surprised to be told you were here to see me," Pena went on. I could see how he was growing annoyed at my silence. "I'm a busy man. What is it I can do for you?" Suddenly it all came out, along with the tears. How I had read in the papers about El Jefe excusing minors, how my boy had just turned 18 in prison, how I wondered if there was anything at all Pena could do to get my boy pardoned. "This matter is outside my department," he lied. That's when it struck me. This devil might seem powerful, but finally I had a power stronger than his, so I used it. Loading up my heart with prayer, I aimed it at the lost soul before me. "This came down from above," he continued. But now he was the one growing nervous. Absently, his hands fiddled with a plastic card on his key ring. It was a prism picture with a well-stacked brunette, Then you tilted it a certain way. Her clothes dropped away. I tried not to be distracted, but to keep right on praying. Soften this devil's heart, O Lord. And then I said the difficult thing, for he too is one of your children. Pena laid down his pathetic key ring, picked up the phone, and dialed headquarters in the capital. His voice shifted from its usual bullying bark to an accommodating softness. Yes, yes, General, absolutely. I wondered if he would ever get to my petition. And then it came, so smoothly buttered, it almost slipped right by me. There's a little matter I've got sitting here in my office. He laughed uproariously at something said on the other end. No, not exactly that little matter. And then he told us what I was after. I sat, my hands clutched on my lap. I don't know if I was praying as much as listening intently, trying to judge the success of my petition from every pause and inflection in Pena's voice. Maybe because I was watching him so closely, a funny thing started to happen. The devil I was so used to seeing disappeared, and for a moment, like his tilting prism, I saw an overgrown fat boy, ashamed of himself for kicking a cat and pulling the wings off butterflies. I must have looked surprised, because as soon as he hung up, Pena leaned toward me. Something wrong? No, I said quickly, bowing my head. I did not want to be pushing to ask him directly what he had found out. Captain, I pleaded, can you offer me any hope? It's in the works, he said, standing up to dismiss me. I'll let you know what I find out. Gracias, muchas gracias, I kept saying, and I wasn't just thanking Pena. The captain held on to my hand too long, but this time I didn't pull away. I was no longer his victim, I could see that. I might have lost everything, but my spirit burned bright. Now that I had shined it on him, this poor blind moth couldn't resist my light. It was time to tell him that what I've been doing for him. I'll pray for you, Captain. He laughed uneasily. What for? Because it's the only thing I have left to repay you with, I said, holding his gaze. I wanted him to understand that I knew he had taken our land. We waited, and weeks went by. A second, and then a third pastoral was read from the pulpits. The regime responded with a full-force war against the church. A campaign began in the papers to cancel the Concordat with the Vatican. The Catholic Church should no longer have a special status in our country. The priests were only stirring up trouble. Their allegations against the government were lies. After all, our dictator was running a free country. Maybe to prove himself right, Trujillo was granting more and more pardons and visiting passes. Every day or so I stopped at the portrait with a fresh flower and a little talk. I tried to pretend he was my boy too, a troubled one in need of guidance. You know as well as I do that casting out the church won't do you a bit of good, I advised him. Besides, think of your future. You're no spring chicken at 69, and very soon you're going to be where you don't make the rules. And then more personally I reminded him of the pardon I'd asked for. But nothing came through for us. Either Pena had forgotten, or, God forbid, something terrible had happened to Nelson. I started having bad days again and long nights. Only the thought of Easter just around the corner kept Petri and Mercedes inching along. The blossoms on the flame trees were about to burst open. And on the third day, he rose again. The little notes kept streaming in. From the few hints Mate could drop into them, I pieced together what the girls were going through in prison. They asked for food that would keep. They were hungry. Bouillon cubes and some salt. The food they got had no flavor. Aspirin. They had fevers. Ephedrine. The asthma was acting up. Saragen. They were weak. Soap. They were able to wash themselves. A dozen small crucifixes. That I couldn't make out. One or two, yes, but a dozen? I believe that they were feeling more peace of mind when they asked for books. Marty for Minerva, the poems, not the essay book. And for Mate, a blank book and a pen. Sewing materials for both, plus the children's recent measurements. Ay, pobrecitas, they were missing their babies. I spent hours with Don Bernardo and Doña Belén next door, wishing my mind would fade like hers into the past. I would have gone all the way back to the beginning of, I wasn't sure of what. Finally, when I'd almost given up hope, Pena arrived at the house in his big, showy white Mercedes, wearing an embroidered gayabera instead of his uniform. Oh dear, a personal visit. Captain Pena, I welcomed him. Please come inside where it's cool. I made a point of stopping at the entryway so he could see the fresh flowers under the portrait. Shall I make you a rum coat? I was gushing shamelessly all over him. Don't bother yourself, Doña Patria, don't bother yourself. He indicated the chairs on the porch. It's nice and cool out there. He looked at the road as a car slowed, the driver taking in who had dropped in on the Mirabal family. Right then and there I realized this visit was as much for him as for me. I'd heard that he was having trouble at our place. I will never call that farm anything else. All the campesinos had run off, and there wasn't a neighbor willing to lend a hand. What could he expect? The whole area was full of Gonzales. But being seen conversing with Doña Patria sent out the message. I didn't hold him responsible for my loss. All he'd done was buy a cheap farm from the government. Mama did, however, hold him responsible. She locked herself in her bedroom with her grandbabies and refused to come out. She would never visit with a monster who had torn her girls from her side. She didn't care that he was trying to help us now. The truth was the devil even in a halo. But I knew it was more complicated than that. He was both, angel and devil, like the rest of us. I have good news for you, Pena began. He folded his hands on his lap, waiting for me to gush a little more over him. What is it, Captain? I leaned forward, playing my pleading part. I have the visiting passes, he said. My heart sunk a little. I had wanted the pardon most of all, but I thanked him warmly as he counted out each one. 3 passes, he concluded, when he was done. 3? But we have 6 prisoners, Captain. I tried to keep my voice steady. Shouldn't it be 6 passes? It should be 6, shouldn't it? He gave me little righteous nods. But Manolo's in solitary and Leandro's still deciding on a job for El Jefe, so they're both, shall we say, unavailable. A job for El Jefe? And my Nelson? I said right out. I talked with headquarters, Pena spoke slowly, delaying the news to increase my anticipation. But I stayed unruffled, praying my glory bees, one right after the other. Seeing as your boy is so young and El Jefe has been pardoning most minors, he swilled his drink around so the ice tinkled against the glass. We think we can get him in with the next round. My firstborn, my little ram. The tears began to flow. Now, Doña Patria, don't get like that. But I could tell from Pena's tone he loved seeing women cry. When I had controlled myself, I asked, And the girls, Captain? The women were all offered pardons as well. I was at the edge of my chair. So the girls are coming home too? No, he said, wagging his finger at me. They seem to like it in prison. They have refused. He raised his eyebrows as if to say, What can I do about such foolishness? Then he returned us to the subject of his little coup, expecting more of my gratitude. So, how shall we celebrate when the boy comes home? We'll have you over for a sancocho, I said before he could suggest something rude. As soon as he was gone, I rushed to Mama's bedroom and delivered my good news. Mama went down on her knees and threw her hands up in the air. The truth is, the Lord has not forgotten us. Nelson is coming home, Norris rushed forward. Since his imprisonment, Norris had moped horribly as if Nelson were a lost love instead of the monster who had tortured her all of her childhood. The younger children began to chant, Nelson home, Nelson home. Mama looked up at me, ignoring the racket. And the girls? We have passes to see them, I said, my voice dropping. Mama stood up, stopping the clamor short. And what does the devil want in return? A sancocho when Nelson comes home. Over my dead body, that man is going to eat a sancocho in my house. I put my hand on my lips, reminding Mama that she had to watch what she said. I mean, over my dead body, Mama hissed, and that's the truth. By the time she said it a 3rd time, she and I both knew she was resigned to feeding Judas at her table. But there would be more than one stray hair in that sancocho, as the campesinos like to say. No doubt Fela would sprinkle in her powders, and Tono would say an Our Father backwards over the pot. and even I would add some holy water I'd bottled from Jacqueline's baptism to give to her mother. That night as we walked in the garden, I admitted to Mama that I had made an indiscreet promise. She looked at me, shocked. "Is that why you snuck out the house a few weeks ago?" No. Nothing like that. I offered our Lord to take me instead of my Nelson." Mama sighed. "Ay, mija, don't even say so. I have enough crosses." Then she admitted, "I offered him to take me instead of any of you, but since I'm the mother, he's got to listen to me first." We laughed. "The truth is," Mama continued, "I have everything in hock to him. It'll take another lifetime to fulfill the promesas I've made once everybody comes home. As for the Pena promesa," she added, "I have a plan." There was that little edge of revenge in her voice. "We'll invite all the neighbors." I didn't have to remind her that we weren't living among our kin anymore. Most of the new neighbors wouldn't come, afraid of being seen socializing with the black-marked Miraballs. That was part of Mama's plan. Pena will show up, thinking the sancocho is meant just for him. I started laughing before she was through. I could see which way her revenge was going. All those neighbors will look out their windows and kick themselves when they realize they slighted the head of the northern Sim. "Ay, Mama," I laughed. "You're becoming la jefa of revenge." "Lord forgive me," she said, smiling sweetly. There wasn't a bit of sorry in her voice. "That makes two of us," I said, hooking my arm with hers. "Good night," I called to the cigarette tips glowing like fireflies in the dark. Monday, Pena telephone. The audience with El Jefe was set in the National Palace for the next day. We were to bring our sponsor, someone willing to give the young offender work and be responsible for him, someone who had not been in trouble with the government. Thank you, I kept saying. "So when is my sancocho?" Pena concluded. "Come on, Mama," I said when I got off the line and had given her our good news. "The man isn't all that bad." "Humph," Mama snorted. "The man is smart is what he is. Helping with Nelson's release will do what 20 sancochos couldn't do. Soon the Gonzalez clan will have him baptizing their babies." I knew she was right, but I wished she hadn't said so. I don't know. I wanted to start believing in my fellow Dominicans again. Once the goat was a bad memory in our past, they would be the real revolution. We would have to fight, forgiving each other for what we had let come, for we had all let come to pass. We made the trip to the capital in 2 cars. Jaimito and I rode down in the pickup. He had agreed to sponsor his nephew, giving him his own parcel to farm. I always said our cousin had a good heart. Mama, Tio Chiche, and his son Blanco, a young colonel in the army, followed in Don Bernardo's car. We wanted a show of strength, our most respectable relations. They had stayed behind to take care of the children. It was my first excursion out of the Salcedo province in 3 months. My mood was almost festive. At the last minute, Nora stole into the pickup. It wouldn't come out. "I want to go get my brother," she said, her voice breaking. I couldn't bring myself to order her out. Somehow, in our excitement, our 2 cars lost each other on the road. Later, we found out Don Bernardo's old Plymouth had a flat near the Constanza turnoff, and when Blanco went to change it, there was no jack or spare in the trunk. Instead, Mama described a whole library that Don Bernardo confessed he had hidden there. In her forgetful rages, Doña Belen had taken it into her head to rip up her husband's books, convinced that there were love letters hidden in those pages. Because we had backtracked looking for them, we get to the National Palace with only minutes to spare. Up the front steps we raced. There must have been 100 of them. In Dede's tight little heels, I suffered my cavalry, which I offered up to my Nelson's freedom. At the entrance there was a checkpoint, then 2 more friskings inside. Those were my poor Norris's cavalry. You know how girls are at that age about any attention paid their bodies, and this was out and out probing of the rudest kind. Finally we were escorted down the hall by a nervous little functionary who kept checking his watch and motioning for us to hurry along. With all the rushing around, I hadn't stopped to think, but now I began worrying that our prize would be snatched away at the last minute. El Jefe was going to punish us Miraballs. Just like with Minerva's degree, he would wait until my hands were on my Nelson and then say, "Your family is too good to accept pardons, it seems. I'm so sorry. We'll have to keep the boy." I could not let myself be overcome by fears. I hung on to the sound of my girl's new heels clicking away beside me. My little rosebud, my pig's eye, my pretty one. Suddenly my heart just about stopped. Ay, Dios mío! What could I be thinking bringing her along? Everyone knew that with each passing year the old goat liked them younger and younger. I had offered myself as a sacrificial lamb for Nelson. Certainly not my darling. I squeezed my Norris's hand. "You stay by me every second, you hear? Don't drink anything you're offered, and it's no to any invitation to a party." "Mamma, what are you talking about?" Her bottom lip was quivering. "Nothing, my treasure, nothing. Just stay close." It was like asking the pearl to stay inside its mother oyster. All the way down the interminable hall, Norris held tight to my hand. I needed her touch as much as she needed mine. The past was rushing down the long corridor towards me, a flood of memories sweeping me back as I struggled to keep up with the little official. We were on our way to the fateful Discovery Day dance, Minerva and Dede, Pedrito, Papa, and Jaimito and I, and nothing bad had happened yet. I was climbing up to the shrine of the Virgencita in Hugüey to hear her voice for the first time. I was a bride promenading down the center aisle of San Juan Evangelista 20 years back to marry the man with whom I would have our dear children, dearer than my life. The room was a parlor with velvet chairs no one would dream of sitting on even if invited, which we weren't. Doors led in from 3 sides, and posted each one was a fine-featured guard from El Jefe's elite all-white court. A few other families stood by in clumps, looking solemn, the women in black, the men in suits or formal guayaberas. My yellow dress stood out like a shout I tried to quiet by draping my black mantilla over my shoulders. Still, I was glad I had worn it. I was going to greet my boy dressed in the sunshine he hadn't seen in a month. A crowd of journalists was let in one of the doors. A tall American draped with cameras approached and asked us in his accented Spanish what our feelings were today. He looked to the little man, who nodded his permission. The audience was as much for the press as for us. We were part of a stage show. El Jefe entered in a wash of camera flashes. I didn't know what I thought I'd see. I guess after 3 months of addressing him, I was sure I'd feel a certain kinship with the stocky, overdressed man before me. But it was just the opposite. The more I tried to concentrate on the good side of him, the more I saw a vain, greedy, unredeemed creature. Maybe the evil one had become flesh, like Jesus. Goosebumps jumped up and down my bare arms. El Jefe sat down in an ornate chair on a raised platform and spoke directly to the families of the prisoners to be released. We had better do a better job of controlling our young people. Next time, we shouldn't expect such mercy. As a group, we thanked him in chorus. Then we were to name ourselves for him one by one and thank him again with little personalized comments. I could not think of anything to add to my thank you, but I was hoping that Jaimito would come up with something. When our turn came, El Jefe nodded for me to speak first. I had a momentary cowardly thought of not giving him my complete name. Patria Mercedes Mirabalde Gonzalez, to serve you. His bored, half-lidded eyes showed a spark of interest. So you are one of the Mirabal sisters, eh? Yes, Jefe, I'm the oldest. Then, to emphasize what I was here for, I added, Mother of Nelson Gonzalez, we're very grateful to you. And who is that little flower beside you? El Jefe smiled down at Norris. The journalists noted the special attention we were receiving and came forward with their cameras. Once everyone's particular thanks had been given, El Jefe turned and spoke to an aide beside him. A hush went through the room like a crack through a china cup. Then talk resumed. El Jefe moved closer to Norris to ask what flavor ice cream she liked. I kept her hand tight in mine while I scanned every door. This might be some sort of roulette game in which I was asked correctly which one Nelson would come through in order to win his freedom. The American journalist threw out questions to El Jefe about his policies regarding political prisoners and the recent OAS charges of human rights abuses. El Jefe waved them away. He had managed to get out of Norris that she liked chocolate and strawberry if it wasn't too strawberry-ish. A door swung open. A cortege of guards in dress whites came through, followed by a handful of sorry-looking boys, their skulls visible under their shaven heads, their eyes big and scared, their faces swollen with bruises. Then I saw Nelson. I cried out and dropped to my knees. "Lord," I remember praying, "thank you for giving me my son again." I didn't need to remind him what I had offered in return. Still, I didn't expect him to come right out and claim it. Later, Jaimito said it was just Trujillo calling me to receive my prisoner, but I know a godly voice when I hear one. I heard him all right, and he called my name. Next day, we were famous. On the front page of El Carib, the two photographs were side by side. Norris giving her hand to a smiling Jefe. Young offender softens El Jefe's heart. And me, kneeling, my hands clutched in prayer. Grateful Madre thanks her benefactor.